In this short lesson, we will talk a little bit about some of the things that might be important to us in future math courses about a function. I won't ask you to mathematically find them, but simply find them by looking at a graph. So there's a lot going on here right now, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to use the graph here. So this is my graph of a function. I'm not given what the function is, but I have its graph. I'm trying to answer all of these questions. So finding f of -5 is saying if I plugged in -5, what would come out? If I look at that graphically, I'm just going to go to -5 on the x and find what's the value of y. In this case, it would be -10. So f of -5 would be -10 because -5, -10 is a point on this graph. F of 0 would be when we're at 0, what is the value of the function? So 0 is one of those tricky ones, but here I've got the point at 0, so it wouldn't be here. This would be like that open circle, meaning f of 0 would be 0. This one's saying all x for which f of x is -2. So in essence, it's saying what x value would give you -2 as a y value. So looking at my y, I'm looking at -2, and I see that there's no value at -2. So this would be none or undefined. But +2 is here, and that would be about right here. So I don't know an exact answer for that because I don't have the graph. So here I'm just going to say about 1.1. So obviously we don't like to round in mathematics when we don't have to, but I'm not really given an exact value. That was my fault for making that particular value on this question. The x-intercepts would be, of course, where does the graph, if anywhere, cross the x-axis? And here that's at 0, 0. The y-intercept, again, where does it cross the y-axis? Also just at 0, 0. So on this one, it's not actually crossing, it's coming up to it and not quite touching it. The domain would be all of the x values that I can use. This would be everything. We talked about this in our last questions. So everywhere on x, I've got a value for y. The range, however, would go from -infinity on the y up to -5, and then add to that starting at 0, which again is a closed bracket, up to +infinity. So it's kind of putting together a lot of stuff that you sort of already knew. This will come into play if you take, a trig or a calc course. This is one for you to try on your own, so press pause, do all of the questions, then press play to check your work. So f of -2 means I'm going to -2 and finding what is the value. So that value looks to be +8. And for f of 1, it looks like I'm down at -4, which means it's the point 1, -4. The next two questions are basically saying if y is 4, what's x? Or if y is 8, what's x? So if y is 4, I've got a value both here and here. So if y is 4, then x was -1 or -4. And if y is 8, x was -2. So notice here, I've got my -2 for 8 and my -2 for 8, so it's the same point. The x-intercepts would be at 0, 0 and at -6, 0. The y-intercept is just at 0. The domain, it looks like goes from -infinity, because even though we can't see it, this line goes on forever and ever and ever. So any value I plug in to the left is going to give me a value for y. But it looks like it stops right here at 4. It's unclear if it's open at the end or not, so we'll assume that it is. So the domain would be from -infinity, and notice I've got a value all the way through up until I get to 4. The range is the y values, so the y values The lowest is negative infinity because it would just keep going down. The highest, I've got a high value here of 8, but over here I've got a high value of 9. So it looks like from negative infinity up to 9, but not including 9 because we're going to assume that's an open circle.